Xin chào các bạn. How is everyone? So today's video is about how to start selling your sauce. There are loads of things that are required in how to sell your sauce. There's loads of components that you have to do beforehand, and even before you start selling anything, you need to make sure that there are certain steps that you need to take before selling the sauce, especially because it's food and you're selling it to the public. There are a number of criteria that you need to fulfill beforehand. So let's get through them. I'll be listing them on the following slide so that you can see all the things that we'll be running through on this video. Now, from my experience, I had to go through and list loads of things that I knew that need to be done because I have a legal background, so I knew some components and I didn't know other components. But there are loads of things that you need to check, have a checklist for before even, you know, veering towards like, you know, designs, logos, even the bottles that you buy. So you have a sauce idea that you either have been passed down to you, that you enjoy, that it's your own creation, or it's a secret recipe, a secret family recipe. Good on you, because it's such, honestly, condiments is such a great place to explore, especially on the food market. But just because it's a preference, just like any other kind of like dish or any kind of flavors you play with, it's such a preference to everyone around you. But saying that, you could be holding a multi-million pound condiment sauce in your hands currently. So how do you start? Where do you start? Where did I start? How I started was, this is something where I will go in detail in each video, but I was thinking, giving you a broad idea of how many steps is required to start your sauce company. And even if you don't want to do a sauce company, even if it's just a side business, there are certain things you need to tick off this criteria list. And it may sound long, but I promise you it's worth the journey at the end. So the first one, a business plan. You always need a business plan, even if you're just doing it as a side hustle, or even if it's just like something as a passion and you're just doing it on the market, on like if you're going to a boot sale or anything like that. It's always good to plan what your goals are. And in the next video, I'll be discussing what a business plan will consist of, but it's always handy to have one, even if you're thinking of starting out something really small. The next one, research. Research is so crucial because, as you know, we have social media, we have so much information, we have the Wikipedia, we have all sorts of shops and online marketplace that will sell different types of sauce. So it may not seem obvious to you on a normal supermarket shelf, but there are loads of companies out there who are doing independent work just like you. So do your research, and I promise you, research from the beginning to the end is non-stop. There'll be so many elements that you'll need to research for yourself, or research because there are requirements you need to fulfill, and it's always come to handy to actually do thorough research, especially from a legal standing point. The next one is recipe experiments, and ingredients sourced. This is really crucial because obviously, like, what is required in your sauce may not be easily sourced out. It may not be something that it can be easily found on the normal supermarket, and it may cost a lot more. You may need to bulk buy ingredients, especially things that require a majority of that product. Experimenting your sauce is really crucial, just because it may be to your own taste, but remember, you have many people that you're gonna have to satisfy. So find a middle ground. It may not be to your taste, it may not be to your parents' taste or your siblings' taste or your friends' taste, but you're finding that middle ground that everyone finds it acceptable. Actually, in fact, it meets everyone's sort of taste guidelines as well. My camera is... And of course, the one that follows after a recipe experiment and ingredient sourcing is the last and final recipe. You have to finalize it so that you have accurate measurements, ingredients, and the recipe so that you can follow consistently. It's so crucial. You can't just make it up every time you're creating a batch. No one's going to accept that. They need consistency, especially if you're selling your sauce online and on the marketplace. If you're making each batch every time, you can't be adding extra ingredients or less ingredients as you feel like it. It's obviously, when you're testing it with small portions, especially experimenting phase, you're kind of testing it with small portions, and therefore it can differ by a gram or two, and therefore you need to test these batches in like say a litre, 2 litres, 5 litres, etc. Because if you are going to plan to sell these sauces like restaurants, in bigger markets, then you need to make sure that the recipe is consistent for you to make sure that it's consistent throughout all your product. The next point I'm going to get onto is how are you going to make it? So for me personally, I am going to make it at home. This is something that I've decided just because I like to keep an eye on things. I'm a bit of a control freak, but also because I like to make sure that I'm making use of fresh ingredients and making sure that every sauce that I make or every bottle of sauce I make is fresh. And I know it's fresh and it's sourced places where I trust, and also I'm making sure that customers know that they're getting a product that I've made only a day or two before. And that's the sort of wonderful part of this whole venture, is that you're able to reach out to consumers and customers who are able to enjoy your products as fresh as it can be, and that's just the bonus of it. However, understandably, when it gets really busy, if you're coming to a point where you're making thousands and thousands of bottles of sauces, this is the point where you need to consider third parties. So manufacturers, they're the ones that you're going to start reaching out to when you're making bulk load of sauces, just because you're going to need someone who's able to produce your bottles or sauces at an expedient rate. And this is for you, either a distribution point of value. This is also a cost value. You're not going to be able to produce the number of sauces or bottles if you're selling it at that rate. But also, the cost value of having a manufacturer and distributor may be cheaper than you actually doing it personally. Small business can run on actually personally doing most of the work. However, when you get to the certain extent where you can't obtain that threshold that your consumers are consuming, then you're having to acquire like other manufacturers and distributors. But actually, in fact, there are loads of small manufacturers who are willing to help out. You don't need to go to something crazy industrial, and there are plenty of companies out there if you Google it. Further to that point, do you have a location? So for instance, if you're selling it through a shop, via your own shop, you know, a brick and mortar shop, then perhaps that's the area where you're manufacturing it. You actually have a kitchen behind that shop, and actually that's a huge bonus, because doing something at home can be, one, very costly, but two, kind of time consuming, because obviously you have your family you're living with, other aspects of life happens. However, if you are doing it at home, it's actually really easy to keep the cost low, and I will be making another video on this, so stay tuned to that one. The next point is marketing and advertising. This is actually all based on you and your personality and how you want to advertise your product. Obviously, if you do little advertisement and marketing, then obviously the results may be differ compared to someone who does a huge amount of marketing and advertising. At first, when you start off with your marketing and advertisement, you don't necessarily need to pay out, you know, advertisements and sponsorship and brand ambassadors of yet. Why don't you build a foundation on social media, because it's free, of course, but also it's easy ways to attract people, far easier than having paid someone to advertise for your product. Stick with being yourself. Stick with being true and having your own personality when it comes to building your own brands. You know, people are attracted to those people who create their own things and put their personality through it. So you shouldn't need to dwindle on the fact that you don't need to pay someone to have it market and advertised. Easy ways to market it is simply just by putting it on all sorts of social media. Advertising will come on its own way. You can also advertise it by, you know, sharing it with your friends, sharing it with your families, and they can share it and they can support it, and of course it will naturally in time will grab other people's attention. Little known secret, it takes time, so be patient with it and don't rush with it. Last 2 points: label, design, and aesthetics. These are great. They're really important for you, how you can market yourself and how you should advertise and how you should lay out your products on your social media, on your website. However, it's the least important out of everything else. And please don't get me wrong, of course there is a huge psychology behind labeling and designing and aesthetics and who you're trying to attract and who you are targeting towards. if you think about it, everything before these last 2 points are so crucial because they set the foundation of your selling sauce business. So far, the last 2 points is just to please people's eyes. If you think about it, yes, it would attract people if you have an amazing artistic design. But in fact, if you look on the shelf of most supermarkets or sauces, their labeling are so simple and actually not so extravagant and not so eye-catching because people know what they want. With the sauces, it's just one of those things where, like, as long as you have a strong, good label and you designed it yourself or someone else designed it, or you have commission for someone who would design it for you, whatever the case is, your label and your design aesthetics are the last thing. You already have an image in your mind of what you want the product to look like. So there's your logo, there's your label, there is your design and aesthetics. And if you're so worried about the last 2 points, make sure you actually check out Pinterest. They have so many things that can help with your aesthetics planning and your color palette and labels. There are a plethora of them on Google Images, on Pinterest that can help you out. And essentially, in my advice and from my experiences and how I'm creating labels now, definitely go for something simple. No one is looking for, you know, Picasso on a label. Honestly, the most important things on a label is literally the brand name, what the source is, and the information of the product you have. For instance, the ingredients, any allergies, you know, etc, etc. You don't need to overcomplicate it. But of course, design is something that you want to put on there, and you can be as creative as possible. If there's one rule that you need to go by, is that make yourself stand out. People won't buy sauce if it looks boring, just because we eat with our eyes. So make sure your logo and your designs and aesthetics is bright and colourful, or if you can go quite the reverse, it can be quite dull and basic, but make sure it catches people's eyes. That means if you look on the shelves of like any supermarket and you say, you know what, all the bottles are red, don't go for a red bottle unless it's chili sauce. That's just a given, really. But definitely test out your logos and your labels and design and any other features with your friends and family and see what they think, or actually put it out to public people who might be looking to buy your sauce. Finally, before you start, you have to appreciate how much it will cost. There will be a lot of money that will be accounted for before you even start selling your bottle of sauces. And that's something you just have to appreciate, because starting a business does not come for free. And actually, it might be the cheapest one to start. If you think about it, you'll be having to pay your domain name, your company registration, any packagings, anything you have to buy in bulk before you can sell. And therefore, you probably be out of pocket for a while. But don't let this bring you down. It's just the start of your journey. Make sure you follow all the steps. Let me know if I'm missing any down below in the comments. But I know this seems very overwhelming, but there's a lot to do, so you best get started. Thank you for watching, and please check out all my videos in my past videos, my present video, and my future videos. As always, please go and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and all of it. I'll be showing you day to day of the things I'm doing, any behind the scenes, and obviously any tips and guidance of how to start selling your sauces. As always, click the like button, subscribe to me, and click the bell for more contents in the future. Cảm ơn các bạn.